Hey everybody, Valerie here, and I am with a special guest today, my husband Brian. So I've got to be nice to him today because we're on film and brag on him a little bit. So as Grandma always says, I don't brag on him enough. So today I'm going to do a little bit of bragging on Brian. So if you don't mind Brian too much, I'm going to throw some pictures up there for you guys to start this off, and I'm going to let Brian talk a little bit about these pictures. So Zeke, if you can bring up some of those pictures for me. Okay, that one is...
that one Grandma T made for us. That was for my coffee house that I used to have prior to coming to work here at Martelli's full time.
Isn't that cool? I had to brag on Graham a little bit. I threw this in, but this one's a little bit more important. These are about Brian. So if you can talk a little bit about that one, Brian. Okay, I'm going to talk about it because he's giving me the face and he didn't know I was doing this, so he's going to kill me. So a little bit about Brian. Everybody knows he's my husband, but everybody thinks it's Brian Jordan. I can't tell you how many times he gets or I get, oh, Brian's your husband? I automatically say no, even though my husband's name is Brian, because they're two different people. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about my Brian today and a little bit about his background. So he is in law enforcement. So this medal here was given to Brian from the state of Florida. It was a medal of heroism. And Zeke, if you can keep turning them, these all coordinate with the same thing. And I'm going to... This is a letter from the governor from the state of Florida. Jeb Bush was actually in the, governor was in the Capitol when he got this medal. So this was from the state of Florida. And there's a couple more. That's his retirement picture and his pin. And then there was two more, I think, Zeke. That was Officer of the Year, I believe, Brian? Yep, that was Officer of the Year. And then that was the Medal of Valor, correct?
Yep.
So there's a picture with my husband, and he was with Jeb, and my son got to take a picture. My son was so excited. I think he was 7. Was Cody 7 at the time?
He was pretty young.
He was pretty young at the time, so he's looking good there. He was a little bit younger. That was back in 2005, I believe, right? Because it happened in 4?
Yep,
and
I think a year after.
And I think there's one more picture. Oh, maybe I didn't get the last one. Him next to his prized possession, his truck. He had outfitted a truck when he was with Gulf Breeze full time, and he had a Ford 150. And I'm going to go back to the one, but I want you to tell the story of the truck when somebody hit you on the bridge.
Well, we had I was a traffic DUI unit, and we had a Ford F-150. It was just a plain white pickup truck. We had put a chrome brush guard on it, and had went to a manufacturer here in Pensacola that manufactured toolboxes, and we had them manufacture a toolbox for us that could be opened up remotely, and inside the toolbox were the lights and graphics for the Gulf Breeze Police Department. So if you drove by it, it just looked like a regular work truck. We use that because a lot of times we have a bridge connecting Pensacola and Santa Rosa County and Gulf Breeze where I worked, and if you put a marked unit out there, I mean, obviously everybody would pay attention and not do silly things.
And there was a lot of deaths on that bridge.
Yeah, we had quite a few wrecks out there, people getting killed on it, so it was a real high priority to get people to slow down on it and pay attention. So that's why we used a unmarked truck out there. But we were coming back. I just made a loop on the bridge, and I was heading back into Gulf Breeze on the bridge. And as I went over one of the hills, the rises on the bridge where boat traffic goes under, traffic had stopped in front of me. Well, I was able to slow down and get stopped. And as I looked up in my rear view mirror, I saw this car coming right at me from behind. And he had no clue what was going on and just slammed into the back of the truck. So after he hits me, and I see him get out of his car, he's looking at his car, he's looking at my truck, and he's just kind of shaking his head like, you know, not real happy that he had hit me. Well, about that time, I just went ahead, flipped the switch. Toolbox opens up with the lights going and the Gulf Breeze police graphics on it. He just turned around, he looked at that, he put his head down. Can't tell you what he said, but yeah, he was really upset then when he realized he had just ran into the back of a police vehicle.
And I always remember that story because I think he was fairly young. And
Yeah.
and as my son hit me about 18 or 19, I was always like, always be kind and courteous because you never know. Something happens. You never know who you're hitting. You never know who you're behind or who you're helping. So no matter what happens, always treat it like it's a very important, whether it's an accident or you're helping somebody. I mean, you never know who you're helping. So that was always Brian loved that truck, and I had a picture. I guess I didn't get it to Zeke. I thought I did, but anyways, I had a picture of that. I was going to tell that story.
And just so you know that not all police are mean, after I got out and talked to him, really nice young kid, just, I mean, he really couldn't help it. It was just kind of a shock as you broke over and all of a sudden all the traffic was stopped. And he felt so bad about it, I couldn't even write him a ticket. I mean, he was at fault in the crash, but I just didn't even have the heart to write him a ticket. He felt so bad. So,
Well, there's a lot of those times out there, and you know, with the way the world is today, people think the cops are bad. But I can assure you, I've lived with one for 20-something years.
how long?
3 or 4. I can never remember. Anyways, and they are very kind. Now, they do have their moments. Brian definitely has that law enforcement presence where I don't, and we'll get into that a little bit later on, and I'll tell a really quick story then as well. But back to the Medal of Honor. What happened that night? And Brian, if you can, because you can tell it better than I can, what transpired that night. So we had Ivan, and we talked about hurricanes, and last year we had Sally. You know, when there's a hurricane that comes on, it's always all hands on deck. And Brian's been through about 4, and Katrina was probably the worst. Although we weren't actually in Katrina, Brian actually worked Katrina because our law enforcement from here went down. And so there was a lot of death. And this was in Pass Christian. Everybody thought New Orleans got hit. And New Orleans got hit bad, do not get me wrong. But Pass Christian was really wiped off the face of the earth. I mean, literally. There was so much death and destruction in Pass Christian where Brian was that I think it got overlooked because New Orleans had so many more people. But the one that we're talking about here currently was Ivan. We are both police officers, and I'm kind of obsessive with my children. So I chose to stay with my children, and Brian went to work for Ivan. He didn't have a choice. I was auxiliary, so of course I had a choice. But Brian did not. So he went in that night, and we woke up to the horrific aftermath of Ivan. It was 2 weeks of, you wanted to know probably what the people are going through right now in
New Orleans.
New Orleans and that area.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have internet for 2 weeks. You can't watch the news. Once the storm goes through, you don't know what happened. I mean, we did that in Ivan. And so Brian went into work. So I'm going to let him tell the story of what happened that night, how he got the Medal of Honor, and tell a little bit about the good side of law enforcement. So if you can do that for me.
All right. Well, as Ivan started ramping up, at a certain point, the winds get to a certain speed. We start having flooding. The police department and certain people in the fire department will move up into City Hall, which was a hurricane-rated shelter, and then we kind of set the storm out up there. And we were sitting up there. Storm had been going on for a while, and I mean, we were just being law enforcement, fire department. I mean, you want to be doing something, not just sitting around. So we were just sitting around. Storm's going on, it's not stopping. One of our firemen, his personal vehicle, while we're in there, we look out the window. One of the trees had gone through the windshield of his car. So I mean, it was blowing pretty bad.
Now, hold on one second. Explain Gulf Breeze. Brian is a police officer in Gulf Breeze. It is how far from the Gulf of Mexico?
Gulf Breeze is maybe a mile from the Gulf.
And the bay, it's right on the bay.
Yeah,
So the bay is
we're on the bay. We're on Pensacola Bay. There's Gulf Breeze. Then we have the Sound, which is a protected area between the beach and the mainland. We're right on Santa Rosa Sound, and then after the beach, then you're into the Gulf of Mexico. So we're probably about a mile or so away from that, inland, and it's blowing pretty bad, and we're getting calls for service. We had a couple other officers had to go out. They also received medals for heroism, and to help an individual. And I think it was early morning
So it was like 2 in the morning.
when this had happened. I mean, the storm just hadn't let up. I mean, it was just constant winds, constant rain. We had tornado warnings popping up every 5 seconds. There was another tornado warning going out. And it was early in the morning. And at a certain point in time, law enforcement, fire, rescue services won't go out into the storm because not only the people out there are in danger, but it also puts us in danger to where if something happens to us, then you have to send out more rescue people to rescue us trying to rescue somebody else. So
Now, mind you, too, they've all been asked to evacuate. So these are people that are left behind that have not chosen to evacuate. So there again, we've done everything we can as law enforcement officers to protect them. So the people that chose to stay behind knew the severity of it.
yeah, they did, but we'd never had one that bad. And before the kind of flooding that we had during Ivan. So finally, we get a call out that we had an elderly couple that were trapped in their house by water, and they couldn't get out. They had boarded up their windows, boarded up their doors, and they were using the garage door to get in and out of their house. Well, once the water had gotten so high, they couldn't get the garage door open anymore, and the water was still rising. So they were stuck in there. So they called and were asking for help. So we had a 5-ton military truck, cargo truck, that we had just for hurricanes and stuff. I maintained that, took care of it, took out, ran it, made sure it was running.
Hold on, let me brag a bit a little. Every Sunday when he went to work on his shift, he made sure that truck was running. If it went down, the battery was dead, he charged it for a year. And everybody would laugh as he would drive that 10-ton truck around the streets in Gulf Breeze, because Gulf Breeze is a very high-end community, high-dollar home. So to see that truck driving around in the neighborhood, people, I mean, it almost became a laughing matter. You know, Brian out, he's just playing with his toys. The military had given it to Gulf Breeze. It was a surplus inventory. So Brian personally himself made sure that truck ran for a year, because if you don't use them, they don't work. So I'm going to brag a little bit about them there. Go ahead.
So anyways, I've been taking care of the truck. This call came in for this elderly couple. So one of the guys from the fire department had walked up to me and said, "Hey, we got a couple trapped in their house. Do you want to go out and go get them?"
Now, they were on the bay.
Yeah, well, they were close to the bay. They were probably a quarter mile away from the bay. And they'd known I had taken care of the 5-ton and knew everything about it, driving it, what it could do, what it couldn't do. So they asked me if I would go along with them. So it was like, well, sure. I mean, we've been stuck in this building for hours, just listening to the wind, the rain, the tornado alerts. It was like, we were getting a little punchy. We were ready to get out of there and do something. So myself, another officer, and 2 firemen got into the fire department's big ladder truck, which was parked up at City Hall. The 5-ton truck was parked down at the police station. So we all climbed into the ladder truck, drove the ladder truck down to the police station, left the ladder truck there. We picked up the 5-ton. The 2 firemen got in the back in the cargo area, and I had another officer besides me as a passenger. Needed him. The rain was driving so much. I don't know if anyone's been in the military or has family in the military. The windshield wiper on military trucks don't work very well at all. So I needed someone else to help me spot where I was going, because vision was really bad. So we weren't running into things, over things, or into things. So we took off. We got down there. We got down to the street where they were at. And at that point, we started hitting floodwaters. So we keep going down in there, and the farther down we're going, the higher the water's getting. So by the time we turned the corner, got to the house to where the people were at, the water was already up to the floorboards of the 5-ton truck. The floorboards on the 5-ton truck, if I were to stand next to it, would probably be about up to here on me if I were standing next to it.
4.5 foot.
Yeah, or so. So it was pretty deep. So we pull in, we get the house. The water was really too deep. Firemen didn't want to go out into it. We didn't want to have to go out into that water. You don't know how fast it's moving. You don't know what debris is in the water. So we just kind of pulled the truck up into the neighbor's yard. Hopefully there wasn't a ditch there. Backed it up to the garage door. At that point, the firemen got out. They were able to get the garage door open. You know, this is the big roll-up garage door. No power, water against it, water on the inside, water on the outside, putting pressure on the door to get it open. They managed to get the door open. So we've got the couple out. We got them up in the back of the truck, and during hurricanes, I think a lot of people don't realize, or flooding, there's a lot of debris, chemicals, sewer. There's just all sorts of nasty things in that water. So we had to run them down to the hospital, which had a skeleton crew that they kept down there. So we had to leave their house, then drive down
It's about 3 miles.
not to the hospital, about 1.5 miles, 2 miles.
With trees in the road,
Oh, yeah.
dumpsters in the road.
So we're driving down to the hospital. As we get down to the main road, you look down the main road, we got to go down. You can see all the telephone poles are starting to lean, are starting to get blown over. So we drive down there. The wind's blowing really bad. We finally had to just quit the windshield wipers, and those 5-ton trucks have windows you can flip open. We ended up having to flip open the windows on it just so we could see where we were going. And we got down to the hospital, and at that time we stayed with the truck, myself and the other police officer. Firemen took the 2 people out, ran them in the hospital so they could get decontaminated. They have to, you know, get their clothes off, let them shower down, get all the hazardous materials and stuff that are on them, having to get that off. So while we're sitting out there, the winds were so bad at that storm. The 5-ton cargo trucks are very heavy trucks, very heavy suspensions. Well, we're sitting in the truck, all of a sudden we could just feel the truck just start rocking when the wind would blow. It was actually lifting this big military truck off its suspension and rocking it. So about that time we called the firemen and asked them if they would please come back out so we could go back to the shelter. So they left, they came back out, and we ended up making it back into the shelter. And at that point I decided I didn't want to go back out again. I'd had enough fun for one night. It was, and it wasn't until I think later that morning or even later that day, I was sitting there thinking about what we had done and where we had gone, and all of a sudden it just hit me as we drove down into that neighborhood, because of the storm surge and all the water. As we were driving into that neighborhood, we were actually driving through the Gulf of Mexico. It had pushed the water up that far. So it's really something to experience when you're there. But on a side note to that, another funny story is, while we're at the hospital calls us. They said they got a call from a couple that was a little farther out in the county, that were trapped in their house and wanted to know if we could go get them. So I asked, you know, how deep was the water out there? And they said, well, they're up in the attic. And it's like, well, there's no way we can get out there with it. I mean, we'll be submerged too. That's just, you know, tell them we're sorry, but we can't come. So, you know, we just hoped the best for them, and we headed back to the shelter after, you know, that couple had been secured. So it was, 3-4 years later, had a customer come into the store, working on her machine. She wanted me to work on her machine. And somehow Ivan got brought up and we were talking about what, how much fun that was. And she was saying, yeah, it was really bad. It was like we were in our house and the water had gotten so bad we had to get up into the attic. And it was like, yeah, a lot of people had to do that. And she goes, well, we had called down to the Gulf Breeze Hospital and asked if they could send someone to get us. And then they called back and said, no, they couldn't because they couldn't get a vehicle in there. It's like, really? It's like, well, strange coincidence. I go, but that was me who decided not to come rescue you.
Yeah.
But
you got to understand.
she laughed about it. She understood that, she knew there was no way we could get in there. And it turned out well. They were good.
You never want to take it for granted. When they tell you to leave, you're not just putting your life at risk. You're putting somebody else's life at risk because if they can come, they're going to come. And I think it was probably 1 o'clock the next day before I was able to speak to Brian. I don't think the cell phones worked.
Nope, nothing
I
was
didn't,
working.
and I know my husband, and so I knew how bad it was when I walked out my door. We had lost our building. We lost everything in that hurricane. And one of those big Lamar signs that you see on the interstates had fallen in the middle of our building. So I was aware how bad it was inland where we were, and I wasn't sure what was going on with Brian. And I think because I am in law enforcement, I don't think I was ever panicked or scared because I knew Brian could take care of himself. So I don't think I ever had that overwhelming of fear. It was more of I wish I had been there to help. I wish I had. My kids were okay. Then when my kids were okay, I'm thinking I should have just helped Brian. I should have been down there. Now I'm glad I wasn't because I probably would have gone and probably gotten killed because I'd have been the one to go, oh, let me jump in the water, and Brian would be like, get your butt back in here. So it was probably best that I wasn't there. But it was an honor to go to Tallahassee with him, and now that he's up here sweating because this isn't what he's good at, and I'm sure when I get home I'm going to get an earful. So I did want to brag about him a little bit, and his family, his kids, we all get to go, Stephanie, Jessica, Cody. It was a family affair. My son collects coins, and I didn't give a picture of that either, but my son collects coins. And so we were in the governor's office, and Brian's talking. The families got to spend time with Mr. Bush. And my son kept looking in his office and kept looking in his office. I'm like, Cody, and I keep grabbing Cody's arm like, you're being disrespectful, like, pay attention, And so he very kindly, I'll have to give him this, very kindly walked over and he said, are you admiring my coin collection? And which I hadn't seen on his table. So he personally took Cody in there and he showed him all his coin collection and actually gave him a coin, because I guess every governor makes a coin when they become governor, which I didn't know. So we've got that framed to this day. So it was a special moment for all of us. So, and I don't brag about Brian a lot, and I'm always hard on him. So without further ado, let's get into the machine maintenance so that he can get over it.
I'd just like to say one thing. One of the last things Valerie said before I left that night was,
don't be stupid.
Don't do anything stupid.
Because I know my husband.
And obviously I don't listen to her, so.
No, he never listens to me. Ever, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But I know he doesn't listen to me. But another thing about anybody who's got military family or law enforcement family, and one of the things that breaks my heart about today is, with all the protests, without getting political, with all the protests, I do not know of one police officer. And there's bad doctors, bad lawyers. I'm sure there's bad police officers, but there is not one police officer that would not put their life on the line for somebody in need when at all possible. I mean, they know the risks, they understand the risks. And as family members, I only do this part-time, but as family members, you understand that they understand the risks. And when they leave, there is a chance they may not come home. And it's almost a moment of pride. You feel pride that somebody that you love is willing to give the ultimate sacrifice to somebody else. And I understood that, and I knew that. I did make a decision to stay home with my children. So, for me, and I think maybe for men, it's a little bit different, but I had a sick feeling about that storm. I really did. And I told Brian before the storm, I usually don't ask Brian, my daughter's a storm chaser. I'm like, whatever, Stephanie. But Ivan, I had a really sick feeling. And asked Brian, I was like cutting the trees away from the house. I was in panic mode for 3 days before it hit. And everybody's like, Valerie, come on. And I'm like, no, I just had a sick feeling about this one. And I was not about to leave my children. It just wasn't going to happen. My kids were too young. Now, I'd be like, you're on your own. I'm going with Brian, but he'd probably kick me out of the truck anyway, so I don't know about how that would work. He was my training officer, so And we went a little bit long. I'll tell the story about how I met Brian on another day.
No, she won't. She won't tell you that story.
Okay, well, now I'm going to have to tell it really quick. So, Brian, the first day that I met Brian, there was an article in the newspaper, and it said Officer Webster made the comment that he's not out here to make friends. So, I get to the police department that night, my first night. I'm getting ready to go into training. They're like, oh, you're going to be riding with Brian Webster. I was like, no, I'm not. And they're like, do you know him? And I was like, no, but I read about him in the paper this morning, and I don't want to get sniped. And so they started laughing. They're like, oh, no, you like Brian. And so here comes Brian. I was like, dude, did you read the newspaper, like what you said? We're going to get killed. And I'll let you explain what you said.
Well, that wasn't even said. And it wasn't just Valerie. I was actually called into the police chief's office that day, wanting me to explain what I had said in the paper. That had said, I'm not here to make friends, which, not really what you want to do as a public servant. But I had the newspaper reporter riding with me the night before, and I was working traffic DUI enforcement. So as we're riding along and we're talking, what I said to him was, being a traffic enforcement unit, this is one job where you're not going to make a lot of friends, because it doesn't matter who you are, nobody likes to be pulled over by the police. So that was what I told him.
I still don't believe this to this day, because I've ridden with Brian.
And his quote was, I'm not out here to make friends, which was totally misquoted.
Brian actually got nice as a police officer because I rode with him, and I have a bleeding heart. And he would shake his head at me and go, Valerie, it took me how many weeks before I could even write a ticket? He's like, I'm your training officer. Enough is enough. Write a ticket. And it was so, oh man, it was so hard for me to do it. So then we're driving that same night, and I was like, okay, yeah, right, whatever, it's your story. So, the first time I'd ever met him, we're sitting there talking, and I said, you're talking about names. And I said, there's only one name in the world I really hate. I said, it's Eugene. That name makes me want to throw up. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, really? That's my name. He goes, it's a family name. So right now I'm thinking, yeah, right, because I just dissed him, so he's dissing me. I was like, yeah, whatever. He goes, no, really. He pulls out his driver's license. Sure as anything, his name is Eugene. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, boy, we just weren't meant to be together. I mean, this night was not going well. It was going horribly. So then we got talking about family, and he goes, I got a sister named Valerie. I was like, no, you don't. Sure enough, got a sister named Valerie. So that was our first night we met, and we had many rough roads during our training experience. We didn't see eye to eye very often. I won a couple times, he won a couple times, but needless to say, I learned a lot. He's probably one of the best officers I've ever met. And I'm not saying that because he's my husband. I've watched him control a 6-lane intersection by himself with no issues. I mean, he's very, very good at what he does. So they were they lost a lot when he went part-time, but we're glad that he's here with us. So without any further ado, we're going to go into the service of machines, because I know a lot of people out there have a lot of questions. So please, while we're talking, if you have a question, please type it. Linda is sitting there getting the questions, and she can ask us the questions. So I've kind of set for Brian a little itinerary, so we're going to go through the itinerary, and then I'm just going to let him talk, because as I told you, he ran that 5-ton for a year. You have to know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I think you have to know, anybody can go to training fix sewing machines, but if you are not mechanically inclined, I think there's that level of you can only do so much. And Brian, he gets mad at me. I'm like, Brian, I need this fixed. I can't do it. But when he tells me he can't do something, I'm very angry. He's like, Valerie, I can't fix everything. I'm like, yes, you can. So whether it's an air condition, I don't care what it is, I'm like, Brian, fix it, because he's sort of like my dad. My dad and him are a lot alike. My dad has like a different brain. He's like sees things in 3D, but my dad's very mechanically inclined, and Brian is very mechanically inclined. So I do think that you need that to really be good at what you do.
Oh, you do. You do. The best sewing machine techs, they're going to have that mechanical ability that's just God-given to supplement their training.
Yeah, they just go in, they just need the basics, and then they got the rest.
Now, the questions you're going to ask, if you do ask questions for Linda, try not to be very specific on this particular machine or this particular make, or because there's so many out there, I couldn't tell you specific makes, models, what you would have to do without actually looking at it.
Yeah, he works primarily on Genomi's, but there's
They all work the same. They're pretty much all the same.
and Albert now fixes our home deck machines. So Brian is just doing the long arms now here. But Brian was happy about that because people would ask me about old machines, and he would get these machines and say, Valerie. I was like, but it's a family heirloom. And he's like, oh my gosh, Valerie. I mean, I had him jumping through hoops, and he would fix them all, and people would just love them. There's two ladies actually drive from South Florida for machines that aren't even worth the cost of a hotel night and the gas that they paid to come have Brian service their machines. So he's very, very good at what he does. So let's start off with the home deck and the oiling, because that's one of the big things, where to oil, how to oil, and there's an oil that you told me that you don't ever, and I know a lot of the questions, a lot of the answers to these, because I've spent a lot of time with Brian traveling, so I do know a lot of these answers, but some of this morning I was like, Brian, and he'd be like, da, da, da. I was like, I need to know the answers to these, because when I'm talking, I need to know the answers to it. He's like, you should know the answer to this, but I don't know a lot of it, so I'm learning along with you as well. So if we can talk about the oil a little bit.
She knows a lot. All right. On the home ducts machine, there's really not a whole lot of maintenance to do to them. They're fairly simple. The way they're manufactured, they're extremely user-friendly. They're not really designed for the end consumer to be going into and doing anything really in-depth inside of them. So cleaning them is at a minimum. You're going to keep your needle bar area right in here, all this area in here. You're going to want to keep clean, keep it brushed out, keep the lint and dust out of it. Also on the, get this up here, of course, the bobbin area. Now I know everyone says they clean their bobbin area, but I have gotten a lot of machines in where they're not pulling out the bobbin case and cleaning out all the lint that's in the bottom of that bobbin case, underneath that bobbin case.
What does the lint do?
Well, the lint will actually cause the bobbin case to raise, so that will contribute to breaking thread and it not stitching correctly. So you also, not just pulling off the cover, but you also want to get in there, make sure you're taking the bobbin case out and cleaning out that shuttle area where your bobbin case goes into, where the hook is.
Now I know you call me a wrecking ball, but when you get like a rat's nest in there, how important is it to be very careful in taking that rat's nest out?
Well, you want to be real careful. Anytime that you get a rat's nest in there, whether it's going to be in the top of the machine or down in the bottom of the machine, all these newer machines now have sensors on them. They'll have limit switches in there. They'll have very small springs that are holding levers inside of them. And sometimes if you get a rat's nest in there and you just start ripping it out, if that gets caught against one of the limit switches or one of the sensors or one of those little springs, you're popping those things out. You're throwing your sensors out of adjustment, and you're damaging the limit switches in there. Same thing for the top. Same thing up here. If something happens up in here, you can't really see if I turn it down a little bit. You can see that you have wires up here coming down into the machine. Well, these wires are going down to your lights. They're going down to sensors inside the machine that's showing your needle bar position. It's showing the presser foot position. So you want to be real careful and take your time and get the thread out of there also, so you're not pulling on things and breaking things and shooting springs across the room. Because I can tell you from experience that trying to replace some of those springs are not fun. They're small, they're a really hard place to reach, so yeah, there's a little bit of cussing sometimes getting those springs back on.
And I'm one of chaos. I'm a rip it, get it done kind of person where, like my dad is like, if we're going to demolition a wall and do work in our house, we're tearing it apart, throwing it. Brian's like, take one board off at a time. The slower you go, the better it is. Now, I think there's a happy medium But when you're dealing with electronics, and these machines are very, very expensive, take that extra time. And if it's stuck and you can't get it, I wouldn't even yank it. I would bring it to the shop and let them maybe do it, where they can get the tools or the right things, or maybe take something off. Because like you said, I mean, I've been with Brian where he's had tiny screws and he's cussing because he's trying to find them, and they're in the bottom of the machine somewhere, and then those springs have to be replaced, and they're so tiny. I mean, I've been on my hands and knees with Brian trying to find a spring that popped off. There's a lot of little things that you don't see in there that really make a difference. And I think so when you're getting those rat's nests and stuff, be very, very, very careful. And if you feel like you can't get it, don't pull and tug. Would you agree with me?
Yeah, take it to somebody and have them look at it. All right, now getting back to the maintenance though. Now oiling, there's really not going to be anything for you to oil underneath the base plate. Just making sure it's clean. You're getting all the lint out of there. Some of the lint off on the side of where the hook is, that part that spins on the inside, really not that critical. It's not really going to affect anything. Just your yearly or month or 6-month service will take care of that. But underneath the bobbin case is the most important place where you really want to clean out.
I have a lot of people ask me this, will call and say, can I use compressed air? And I asked Brian this question today because I wasn't even really sure about it. And so I'm going to let him explain that question.
Yes, you can. Most of the machine manufacturers will tell you don't use compressed air. The reason they're doing that is if you spray the compressed air in there too long, it's going to start creating condensation as it's coming out of the nozzle. Then the condensation is going to get on these metal parts on the inside of the machine. None of these metal parts are inside these machines have any type of protective coating on them to make them resistant to corrosion or rust. So they will corrode or rust if they do get wet.
And that is a very true statement. We had a lady that came in and that bought a brand new 15,000 when they first came out. We live on the Gulf Coast. She went home for the summer, and she left her air, I think, did she say she told us she left it on 70. She left it pretty
high. It was high enough not to completely clear out the humidity in her house. It was. And
in 4 months that she was gone, it kept giving problems. It was a brand new machine, and finally I was like, Brian, this isn't. Brian took the whole machine apart, and there was actually rust in that machine. If you live on the water, any kind of moisture, don't leave it out in a sunroom that's not air conditioned. If you're spending a lot of money on these, and Brian's a big car guy, right? So he leaves his car in the garage and he waxes, and you're going to spend that kind of money. Make sure you take care of these. Do not leave them in a uncontrolled environment with humidity, because the little bit of humidity that you don't even think is there can affect it. And do you have an idea of what that should be? What you should not let that air conditioner go under?
No, not really. I mean, it's just you definitely just want to leave it in a climate controlled environment. As long as the AC is running, and it's pulling humidity out. This is for the southern regions where we have high humidity and stuff. Just make sure that's where you're leaving your machine. We have had, even our long arm, we had a customer who had a sunroom, and a sunroom in Florida is an unair conditioned room that's either enclosed by glass or has screens all the way around it. And that was the only room she had for her long arm machine, so she put it out there. Now they did have a small window unit they could turn on when she was out there sewing to get it comfortable out there for her. But when they weren't out in that room, they would turn that air conditioner off, and then they would shut the door to the rest of the house, so then that room's exposed to all the heat and humidity that Florida has to bring to you. And she had called to get it serviced. She said it was making noises. I mean, we got down there and I ended up having to replace a lot of parts on it. There were bolts, nuts, some of the handlebar pieces. I mean, there shafts. There was just a lot of stuff that just rusted on it from the humidity.
If you put them in the box, let's say you go up to north for the summer, putting them in box, would that even help, or should they just take them with them?
they're, what, you're talking about
Like the
a home,
foam?
a home deck?
Yeah,
or-
like if they put it back in the foam box, would that even help, or should they take them with them?
No, if you can't leave your machine in a climate controlled area, then yeah, you definitely want to take it with you. And it's not so much on these, the metal pieces, they will cause some rust, but for the most part they'll work. They're pretty well built. All the major manufacturers really make good machines. But what you have to worry about is, as everybody knows now, all the new machines are electronic. All your stitches, your stitch regulations, everything is done through electronics and on a board. And you definitely don't want that electronics exposed to high humidity for a long period of time, because you will start having board problems, electronic problems. And the motherboards on these machines, which are usually the ones that go out, are very expensive. So that's one thing you really want to try to avoid doing, is doing any damage to that motherboard.
Right. So we're going to transition in just a few minutes to the long arm machines. But before I go to the long arm machines, thread matters. And I'm going to let Brian talk a little bit about the thread and the quick spin. I'm going to let him go over that and tensions on home deck machines. So if he can give that just a few minutes. And then I want to switch over to the long arms, because I know we have a lot of long arm people
And
watching.
we've got lots of questions though on basic sewing machines too.
Okay, so before we go to long arms, we'll answer those questions. So if Brian could go over real quick just the quick spin, why it's important, and tensions on sewing machines, and then we can go from there.
All right. First thing we're going to talk about is threads. Everybody out there tries to spend the least amount of money they can on threads. Thread's expensive, so they're always looking for deals on thread. The problem with that is thread, just like anything else, will age and will deteriorate. I can't tell how many customers' houses I've gone to setting up long arm stuff and said, yeah, I went to an estate sale and I got all this thread. And they have no idea how long that thread's been there, what it's been exposed to as far as heat, humidity, cold. All that's going to deteriorate the thread. On home deck machines or hand sewing or things like that, it's not such a big issue. These machines, believe it or not, even the simple sewing machines that these major companies put out, they really put a lot of time and effort and engineering for these things to run and run all the time, every time you turn it on. I mean, they're pumping out thousands of these things.
And I want to go back to when you're talking about thread, it has like little fiber that come off of it. Over oiling is a big thing I forgot to talk about during oiling. Not only do you not want to use that graphite oil.
Oh, yes, we left out the graphite. Yes. All right, the graphite oil. There's a lot of husbands out there that, you know, their wife will say, hey, my machine needs to be oiled, and they love putting graphite oil on it because it is the slickest thing out there. And so they figure putting the graphite oil on these machines will obviously make it run better because it's so much slicker and it lasts longer. Well, the problem with that is it's graphite. It doesn't go away. It stays there forever. Every little thing that can attach itself to that graphite oil will attach itself to that graphite oil. All the fibers, everything will just stick to that stuff. And not to mention it's graphite. So if you get that oil on something that you're sewing, on a quilt, a dress, a piece, if you're doing piecing with it, that stuff's not going to come off.
You know, what oil should they use?
On home decks, most of the time you're going to use just a regular machine oil. It's a very light oil. Doesn't last very long. That's why, you know, if you look in your manuals when you have your machines, they'll give you times, how many times when you should oil it in between sewing.
And how important
because
is
it burns
oiling?
off very quickly. And you definitely want to keep it oiled. It's very important. There's a few areas that you're going to be able to get to, and then there's a lot you're not. One of the areas you can get to is up in here, and this is going to be your arm, control arm for the zigzag, which is what's going to move the presser foot back and forth. So you want to put a drop on there, and you always want to make sure you're putting a drop on the top and on the bottom of your needle bar, and then also on your presser foot, because remember, this presser foot, as you're sewing, this presser foot is constantly moving up and down. So you want to make sure you got those two things oiled. There are bushings that they both go through, and you can wear them out, and as that happens, your needle bar is going to start moving on you. And then, of course, that's going to start affecting your stitches. It's going to start breaking thread, and you're going to start having issues. And then this whole assembly will have to be replaced. So you want to make sure you keep that area right there oiled.
But I think what you're saying is more often is better than more oil, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, less oil, just do it more. You don't really want to saturate it with oil because, as you know, I'm sure there's people that have done that, to where the oil ends up getting down into your material, and then you've got to try to get that oil out of there. And that's pretty much it.
Can I ask some
on the graph
questions?
plate. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, so we had, how often should you take your sewing machine in for maintenance? Is it based on hours used or after so many
We had
months?
that conversation this
Yeah.
morning.
All right. How often should you bring in your machine? More than every 2 years. I've had a few of those. It's a huge mess by the time they get in there. I think most of the manufacturers, if I remember correctly, are going to recommend every 6 months to a year, depending on how much you use it. And you definitely don't want it to go any longer than a year to bring it in to be in service. Probably every 6 months. If you bring it in every 6 months, that gives you the option of contacting your local tech and saying, hey, I've got my machine, I use it quite a bit, I really can't be without it for a while, so can I set up an appointment so I can bring it in a specific day, you look at it, do a basic cleaning, maintenance on it, and I can get it back in a day or two. That gives you the ability, to make an appointment and try to work something out where you can do that.
As
opposed to waiting until it actually breaks down, and then you have to take it in. And, well, just like with anything, whether it's a car or appliance maintenance or anything else, you go to the bottom of the list because there's other machines there ahead of you.
Well, not only that, but if you have to order a part,
And especially now today,
they're out of stock.
With all the corona that happened, there's shortages, manpower shortages in factories. Factories happen to close down. Parts, electronic parts are a little harder to get than they used to be. So there's going to be a longer wait time to get some of these parts. So maintenance will prevent a lot of those problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing maintenance isn't going to prevent is an electronic thing, and that can go at any time. Everybody
Humidity
has
matters.
computers, phones, all that stuff, so we know that. But maintenance will pretty much eliminate all your mechanical issues if it's taken care of.
Now, we had a question that if somebody is cleaning their machine, how safe is it for the average home sewer to go with the cleaning process? Should they be taking apart the machine to clean?
You
No.
really shouldn't do that. Now,
Open the cover.
some of the heavier machines, the heavier duty machines, this isn't one of them, but we'll have a tray on the bottom that will have like 4 screws that you can pull off the tray, and you can clean that out, get the dirt and stuff out of there. But as far as taking the case off, that has the potential of actually voiding your warranty. So you really don't want to be tearing it apart yourself.
I throw up when I'm just going to be honest with you. These brand new machines, $15,000. Brian opens, I walk around. I'm like, Brian, can you put that back together? I'm like, Brian's like, I got it, Valerie. I mean, I can't even watch. You get into some very, don't you, Brian? I can't watch him when he does them, especially the really expensive ones. I'm like, Brian, how do you know how to put? He goes, Valerie, I got it, and I'll just have to walk away. But there's a lot in there. Like you said, one little spring that pops, that's it, you're done. I mean, you don't want to be responsible for that. You really don't.
And not to mention, and I'm sure any tech will attest to this, if you go in and attempt to repair it, and you do something that you don't know you did, and we don't know that you did,
Tell the truth.
just tell the truth that you went into it and you did something. That way, because I've had machines where I haven't known that the people have, they haven't told me they've actually went into the side of it, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with this thing, and it's just driving me crazy. Trying to figure it out, and come to find out they had actually gone into it themselves. So with them telling me what they did, I was able to find the problem and get it fixed. So that
I
goes
wanted
with
to go over
anything.
that
If you
a
do
little, yeah.
something, just be honest, say you did it. We're more happy with that than you not telling us.
And home deck too, if you're doing needlework and you hit, and I've had some really close friends do this, and you hit that ruler and you jack that needle bar,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. You need to tell your dealer if it's your fault. Most dealers are going to work with you, or good repair people are going to work with you. But you can't just say, "Oh, this machine I don't know what happened to it," because then they don't know where to start. And those rulers will jack up your machine if you hit it. You want to make sure that your template is high enough where it's not going under that foot, because that's a big deal, even in long arms. So, and I do want to get to long arms, but is there any more questions?
Yeah,
on
we've
that?
got a bunch.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, how important is it to buy brand parts versus aftermarket parts?
It's going to be fairly important.
Okay.
There's not a lot of really aftermarket parts, other than maybe presser feet, things like that.
And that was the next question. Is it important to use only branded feet, or can you buy off-market feet?
No, you can buy the off-market presser feet. That's fine. As long as they're fitting on the machine, they shouldn't create any problems.
Okay.
And I do know, like, even for us, we'll say with the Curve Master, if it's this machine, that machine. But sewing machine companies, one thing I don't like about them, and I understand it's really, they have to stay alive, so I understand that. But they change the systems on. Bernina is different and they are constantly, when they come up with a new machine, because they want you to buy all these new feet. So just be very careful when you're buying these off-market prices. It's not that the foot isn't good. It may be that the newer machines knew that foot was out, and they make the change so you can't use that foot. So make sure when you're buying those feet, you're telling them what year machine you have. Do a little research. My husband is very big on going into chat rooms. Go into some of these chat rooms and you'll read about, I can't use it on my machine. I can't use it on this machine. And we have the Curve Master, which is an awesome foot, but there's some machines it does not work with. So just do your research for sure when you're doing off-market press feet.
And then we have a question. What are the general tension settings on a home machine?
He told me I couldn't go into this too much.
That you really can't go into. Every machine on it is going to have a tension dial usually on them somewhere. So the tension dial is factory preset. So this is how you're going to adjust your tension up here. Your bobbin cases, they are all going to come from the factory preset to the correct tension. Can they get knocked off and knocked out of tension? They can, like sometimes they'll get bent. The little tension piece in there can get bent.
No, wait, you give her. So would it behoove you if you're having tension issues like that, and I know tensions with the long arms is a whole nother thing we'll talk about, but would it behoove them to buy, and I don't know long arms, tensions on the top and the bottom, would it be better for them to buy the new bobbin case rather than try to mess with the tensions?
Oh yeah, you definitely, if you've got a bobbin case for your machine and you've got a bird's nest and you ripped out the thread and you somehow damage that particular bobbin case, you're definitely better off just going out and buying a new one.
And maybe have one.
Not trying to fix the old ones. They're not easy.
Because you
And
may
as
not
far
even
as the
know.
tension goes up in the head up here, there are specific procedures that the techs have to take to check the tensions on them. Especially with electronics, there's actually there's screens in here that we can get into that you can't, that will allow us to run motors and stuff in here that control tension, and it will allow us to run those motors without the whole machine going to where we can check the tensions and make sure everything's working. So basically, if you're starting to have tension problems, the best thing to do is take it in, get it clean, because chances are it could be something up here in your disc where and it just takes a small little piece of lint to cause a problem. It doesn't take much at all. So take it in, get it clean, get it serviced. That'll probably take care of 99% of your tension issues. Just taking it in and getting it serviced.
I would definitely say have an extra bobbin case, because even when there's damage to a bobbin case, sometimes your eye can't even see it. It's so minute. If you drop it on the floor and you have linoleum, you may not even see it, but that little bit will cause that breakage. And we got to move on because I know we're almost out of time and I want to do the long arms. But if you're trying to free motion on your machine too, and it's a free motion machine, if your stitches are skipping and stuff like that, it's not necessarily your tensions. And we're going to talk about that in long arms, but I think long arms and home decks work pretty much the same. If you're not moving consistently, you say, oh, my tensions are off. No, it takes a long time to be able to quilt something. And Zeke, if I can go ahead and put some of those pictures. Now, this is for long arms, but I want to show the difference in tensions on, we've done these pictures for the long arm, and that's this quilt that I have here. So you see that looks beautiful on the front. Looks pretty good. You see there's a little bit of issues. And if you can go to the next one. Look at that. You can see how bad that tension was off on the one side, right? And then as Brian fixed it, you can see the second side that's now really well. But on the front, it's very deceiving. So that is a tension issue. That's a Q-bot, so it's not you moving it. But that's what I'm talking about, tensions being off. It's not always on the top, it's on the bottom. And we can go to the next one real quick.
And one thing I want to say is, one thing I always get asked is how do I know which tension's off? If you can see your top thread on the bottom of your quilt, your main tensioner is going to be your issue. You're going to have to adjust that. It's either got too much or not. It's probably not going to have enough tension on it. So it's pulling completely through whatever you're sewing. If you start seeing your bobbin popping up through your top, then that's probably going to be a bobbin issue, so you want to go ahead and adjust the tension on your bobbin. One of the most important things on long arms when you're adjusting tensions are don't adjust the top, then adjust the bottom, then adjust the top, then adjust the bottom. Because if you do that, you're going to be doing that all day long. Because as you adjust the top, it changes what the tension is on the bottom. As you adjust the bottom, it changes what the tension is on the top. So the best way to do it, and the way I try to get everybody to do it, is play with your top tensioner. Get that to where it's the best that it can be. It might not be perfect yet, but get it to where it's the best it can be. Once you've got it there, leave it alone. If the tension's still off, then go down to your bobbin case. And then start making your minute adjustments on your bobbin case until it's the best it can be. Now at that point, you're either going to correct the problem or you might have to tweak the top a little bit, but that will get you there that way. Just don't continually go back and forth, top and bottom, top and bottom. You want to get one working the best you can get it working, then go to the other one, then use your top tensioner to kind of tweak it from there.
And that's one of the biggest things along. Okay, so here's another picture. This is on the same quilt, and if we can turn that around, do you see how it's perfect and you can't see the thread? That's with the thread tensions being adjusted. Okay, now this one right here, it looks perfect on the front. You go to the back, perfect there. Now sometimes I did notice on this quilt that there is just one spot, and I don't know if Zeke can, is there any more pictures, Zeke, or was that the last one I gave you? Sometimes you'll have a one that's perfect, if you can see right there, that little speck. And I'm just wondering, Brian, I was going to ask you, is that just the start and stop point?
On that one, no. That is for whatever reason, it just lost for a split second a little bit of its tension.
And is that because it's going around the corners and everybody knows doing circles?
Sometimes it can be either when it's making a curve or a corner or something like that. Sometimes it can drag a little bit and pull the thread.
Now when you're free motion quilting, how can you cut down on the curves? Because I know curves are a big problem for people who do the free motion.
Well, doing the free motion, if you're doing corners, if you're making right angles, if you're making circles, It's just control and getting used to it. You just have to, when you start getting into corners, or you get into a corner of a square, a triangle, or you're making circles, you just kind of got to remember to maybe slow down just a little bit. Because as you're making a circle, or as you're coming to a point and then pulling back, you're actually exerting more force on your material than you realize. And what's that's doing is then you're actually pulling the thread through the needle instead of letting it stitch. And that's where you're going to start getting like some eyelashing, or you're going to get that little run of thread in the corner. So it's just, remember, when you're doing corners or you're doing circles, just once you get into it, slow down a little bit, because just naturally your motion, you're actually going to put more strength and more speed into it than you realize it. So it's just a lot of practice when you're doing free motion at first. Try different things, try circles, try squares, try triangles.
It's a learning curve.
Do
You
all
have
that.
to. Matter of fact, I'm not going to name names, but a very dear friend of mine bought the M7 and they said, I don't like this machine. It doesn't work. There's something wrong with it. And I went to Brian and I said, Brian, we were at a
Can't we
trade
tell
show.
him who it is?
No. We went to a trade show and I was like, Brian, he's like, Valerie, it's her. I was like, no, you don't understand. It's not her. She's having problems. She knows how to sew. Brian's like, I don't care who thinks they know how to sew. When you're doing free motion, it's very different. I said, but she does free motion. He said, there's a difference because the M7 has a much wider throat. It gives you more space. And because it gives you that more space, you can explain, Brian, why and we have a new two-tier table that's a flat surface, right? So we'll go into this. See how that flat surface is? It goes right up, and see a couple more pictures. It really wasn't about this today, but then we'll get a couple more pictures. Why is it important that that table is level and that you have a space? Because when you're free motioning on that M7, why did you tell me it was their problem?
It was just they're pushing their speed, and they're going faster than the machine can sew. When you're in that, when you got the bigger opening area, it gives you a lot more room to move, and you can really just start, throwing that material around, and you're starting to go outrun your machines, basically what you're doing, which is going to cause you to pop thread and have all sorts of thread issues with it. So sometimes you do have to
And
slow
I was
down.
actually at a trade show, and I didn't believe Brian, so I called the Janome, the head guy in Janome. I have his cell phone number, and I called him, and he said, Brian is absolutely right. And I was like, oh. Well,
And that's the way it is most of the time. I'm usually right and she's wrong.
Most of the time he is. And this is one of our customers that just bought the two-tier table. I was going to show this. I can't remember her name now. I was going to write it down. I forgot. But this is the two-tier table, because when you're doing that free motion, you have to concentrate on what is, and that M7 has such a large throat. When you have to concentrate on your quilt, you don't want it to drop off, because when it drops off, it's pulling. It's forcing you to pull, and it's falling back. And we're going to come up with something to help that to fit on these tables too. There's bungee cords. That's another topic. But as you can see on this new two-tier table, it gives you that. And for people that have the cutting table, you can back the cutting table right up next to it. You can lower it down so you even have a bigger surface, because you definitely don't want the drag, because that drag is what causes a lot of problems. And you think it's tension. It's not tension. It's you. It's just fact. Been there, done it. I didn't believe it, but I'm a believer now for sure. So definitely when you're doing free motion, you have to practice. And even if you say, I've been doing this a long time and I know how to do it, don't ever say that. Listen, because 90% of the time when somebody will say that to Brian, Brian's right. There's that one chance. There was somebody that had nicked, for those of you who have our long arm, there was some of you who nicked a needle plate. And I was with Brian. I was sweating. When I go to these long arm calls with Brian, I got no problems, because I know Brian knows what he's doing, right? He's going to go in there. He's going to solve the problem if it's a problem, no matter what. Well, we were there about an hour, and I'm talking, and Brian says, shut up, Valerie, you talk too much. But I'm like, well, you're fixing a machine. What else am I going to do? He goes, can you go talk in another room, because you annoy me? I'm like, great. So I try to get the customer, and so I'm in there.
In a good way, I was trying to concentrate on what I was doing. Not eavesdropping on the conversation.
So we're talking, an hour goes by, and I'm like, I'm a little worried. And so I walked in there, I was like, how you doing? He's like, why don't you go talk? I'm thinking, you tell me not to talk too much, now you're telling me to talk. Needless to say, it took about 3 hours, and you could just see the sweat pouring off Brian's face. Like when I asked him to talk about himself a little while ago, you can just see the bead. And I know my husband, he's, you know, when his dad passed away, I can just see when Brian's stressed, and I know. And I'm thinking, oh, this isn't good. Like, you know, we drove all this way. We didn't bring another machine because it was a simple fix. It was a thread. Brian's got it under control. Well, he could get it, and it was going really good. And about every 10 minutes, he'd break a stitch. And then she'd sit down. It's not working. Less than a minute, she would break that thread. Less than a minute. Brian's like, She's like, see? And so, because Brian is so good at what he does, when he was moving the fabric, he was doing it so good that for 10 minutes, he wouldn't have any problems. But then it would break. Well, he got an aha moment 3 hours into it, and he got one of his little eyeball things, and looked at his needle plate, and there was a nick that was how big? You could barely even see it.
No, it was extremely small, and it was just on the inside throat of the needle plate. So that tells you how small of a nick that was
So
in
when
there.
he would just catch it in the right way, but when that needle goes up and down, right, he never deflects it because he's that good. But people who aren't that good, they push their needle a little bit, and you push it too much, and you're going to be snapping that thread. And something else I wanted to bring up, when something goes wrong with your machine in long arms, right, Brian will tell this story 50 million times, and it is so true. My thread's breaking, this, and they call, and you're in a heated moment when you call, because I'm there. And I hear it, and I'm like, I hear the anxiety, and Brian's like, you need to calm down. What was the last thing that you did? And I haven't done anything, and I haven't. Brian's like, what was the last thing you did? Was your sewing machine working great? It was working fine, and then it just stopped. What was the last thing you did? Did you change your thread? Did you change your needle? Whatever the last thing you did on that machine before it was doing good is probably going to be your problem. There's bad needles. There's bad thread. How many times have we said it? So
Bad bobbins.
before you get that angst up, try to change it out again. Put in a new needle. Make sure the needle is in the correct way, because we drove 12 hours to fix a machine for a lady on a Thursday night, all night long. And I made Brian do it. He was like, Valerie, I'm telling you, her needle's in backwards. She just won't
See
listen
the
to
trend
me.
here? She just makes me do a lot of things I don't want to.
I'm like, she has a wedding tomorrow. We're driving. That's it. We're going. So we drove all night long, got in about 3 o'clock, got up at 7. I said, I'll go with you. Had my thing, got my keyboard out to do my work in the truck. He wasn't even in there. 5 minutes comes out, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she made her mad. Oh my gosh, because Brian isn't very gentle with things sometimes. I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh my, because I'm very customer oriented. I said, Brian, what did you do? He goes, nothing. He throws his toolbox in the back of the truck, gets in the truck, and you talk about sweating. I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, what did he say? She must have made her really mad. So he goes, yeah. He goes, I told her it was her needle. She didn't want to listen. I don't like the attitude. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sweating. I'm like, Brian, you are kidding me, right, Brian? He goes, yeah, I'm kidding you. She had her needle in backwards. So you get over anxious with your machine, and the last thing that you change, try it. Don't say, I know my needle's in the right way. How long has she had the machine? 3 years?
Yep.
Been putting that needle in for 3 years. Put it in the wrong way and was so angst that she knew it wasn't her. You got to check those things. There's bad thread. There's a bad spot. So when you're breaking thread, it could be you. But the way to find out if it's you is put another spool on there.
And one other thing, and you can't stress this enough, but it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're having a problem, you can't correct it, you're starting to get frustrated, shut everything down and walk away. Tomorrow's another day. Chances are you get back up in the morning or the afternoon, whenever you start to go sewing again, you're going to have that problem fixed in about 5 minutes. It's just you become so frustrated you can't think straight, and you don't remember what you did, and you end up doing the same thing over and over again, and it just keeps replicating the problem. So
And
don't
honest.
worry about stopping and just walk away. It's going to be much better.
Always be honest. If you're going to call, especially if you have our machine or any tech, if you've done something, let's say you hit a ruler, but you change the bobbin, you think that's not it. It could be it. Brian worked for 3 days on a machine talking about walking away. He would not walk away from this machine. It was 10, 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, dude, you need to come home. This is ridiculous. He just couldn't get this machine to work because we check every one that comes out of the box, and it just was breaking thread. And he was 3 days. It was the needle bar. How much did it move? Like hardly at all.
No, very little.
But 3 days he worked on that, and he's like, I should have known. I've been doing this long enough. I should have known to check that. And it just is never a problem, so he didn't think to check that.
But once again, that was one of those, finally, it was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm just walking away from this for now. Because it had done so much, I just couldn't. Next morning, I got back up, refreshed, got some sleep, had the thing running in 10 minutes.
Yeah. So definitely when you're calmed down is the better time to work on it. And I know you don't have that luxury all the time because you wait till the last minute and it might be your only day off. But you got to make sure you're keeping your calm about you, because once you get angst, nothing goes well. I mean, I can tell you from experience. I've watched Brian walk in hundreds of times. We've been doing this together for 15 years now, and every time he walks in the door, it's a 5-minute fix. He spent 2 hours with him on the phone the day or 2 or 3 before we make arrangements to go down and fix these machines. I mean, we just went to Houston. I didn't go with Brian this time. He jumped in the car and he didn't even think it was what it was.
No, she had sewn her finger, and so, I figured her jerking her finger, the needle had gone down into it, somehow hit the hook, messed up the timing somehow, or put a nick in the hook, or had done something to it really bad, because I sewed my finger too, and I know what it can do inside the machine when you do that, when that bent needle, after it's gone through your finger, starts pounding on stuff on the inside of the machine. So I really thought she had done something to it. So I had taken spare parts with me. I took a whole new spare needle bar assembly with me. I figured maybe the needle bar got bent, something got in there and got down there, and it was just her needle was in backwards.
And ours is not like any other needle, so definitely be checking your book for that, for the needle position, to make sure you are putting those in properly. And I know we've gone way over today, and I'm going to talk to Brian and see if I can get him to come back for a little bit more in depth, maybe on the long arms too. It took me a little bit to get him here today. And I don't get him here very often, so I did want to brag on him a little bit, so that took a little bit of time too. But do we have any more questions that we could?
Well, we had several questions that I commented. I'm not sure if it really is something you can address now, but if they do need to get more information, they can contact you. Somebody asked about surgers, that they needed to be serviced, and I said probably.
Yeah. Now,
Like,
if you've bought the surgers from us and you need it serviced, Al does the home deck machines now. The surgers everything. Brian
Yep.
does mostly the long arms. Not that Brian can't help you, and he is my husband, so he has to help me. But Al is the one that does fix the machines over at the storefront office, and that number is 850-542-4440. And if you are having problems with long arms and you need some help, give Michelle a call. She's really good about working with Brian and getting him the messages that he needs. And the number here for long arms is 850-433-1414, and just ask Michelle to have Brian give you a call, and he can help you with anything. And a lot of times it's an easy fix. It's a 5-minute phone call, and he can help you. Sometimes it turns into frustration and he ends up going, but just know that more times than not, he's gone for nothing. And when we're jumping in these cars, I haven't been doing it lately. I'm a horrible wife. I used to do it all the time, but the older I get, the less I like to travel. So he drives, in the last month, he's probably driven 4 times to fix machines that were simple fixes. And he always does it with a smile on his face. And he doesn't
Because it
really...
gets me out of the office.
Gets him away from me from home for a day. So he doesn't really complain. He's a good sport. But I miss him when he's gone, but don't tell him I said that. So if you get a chance, call before the problem gets too bad, and maybe when you're not frustrated. Because when you let it go to the point you're frustrated, it's really not good for anybody. It just doesn't end very well at all. Is there any more?
We got lots of loves and thank yous, and this was great information, and they want you back.
I'll have to make him come back. Trust me.
So the next one will be pay-per-view, right?
I'm telling you, it was a lot for me to get him up here, and he really said no. And I was like, you can't tell me no. You sleep in my room. You're going to be sleeping on the couch. And he told me, no, I'll sleep on the couch. I said, that's not happening. So I guess he figured he wanted to
No,
sleep.
actually, we got 2 new couches. They're not very comfortable, so I don't think either one of us is going to be sleeping on the
They're
couch.
horrible. They look nice. Stephanie steered me in the right direction. It looks beautiful, but oh man, let me tell you, it is not fun to sleep on. It's been there a couple times, and not because of him, but because I wasn't feeling good. And I told him, this couch. Have I told you it stinks? It really does. So
Usually once a night.
now I do want to say we got some upcoming events. The Creating with Martelli, the Square Dance is September 21st. They talked about it today. I was going to show it, but they've already done it today. They've showed it. I'm excited about that one. That's a new whole set of templates. That's going to be great. Tomorrow I do believe they have a fabric sale, or Thursday they have a fabric sale, so don't forget to catch that. Also, too, David and Dad went down to North Carolina, and they were on a TV show this morning, If you are not part of the quilting group, go join that group. If you're part of it, David put a link there. You'll be able to watch the replays as well. So go back and look at that, and we're excited for that. And we are also The Right Tool, The Right Way with Joe Allen. It's September 22nd. We're excited. Fall is in the air. That's creating with Martelli, and that will be September 28th. If anybody out there is a store, we are doing a lot of wholesale things. We've gotten window stickers and peels, and we've built a new display for wholesale. You know anybody that's a store that's going to carry Martelli product? Houston, we're going to be launching a lot of new things, and we have a new wholesale website as well to get discounts. So if you are a store, make sure you call the office and talk to Melody. We are looking forward to the Quilters Estate Planning, which was Janine James. That was one of Brian's first customers, I believe, was Miss Janine, and that was 15.
She's been with us. She's on her third machine. I think we've kind of had 3 little bit different versions, and she's upgraded each time.
Cody was about 7 the first time, and Cody went out with his dad. It was during the summer one time, and so she's a special lady, and she does all of our long arm classes too. So
Oh yeah, Janine's wonderful. I just couldn't do it without her. So she's a blessing, that's for sure, to have her.
So she's going to be coming in, and she's going to be doing the Quilters Estate Planning, and we'll probably talk a little bit of long arms in there as well. And make sure that you are getting notifications. Click the follow button. Once you click the follow button, you can go where Zeke's got it right there, the 3 little buttons. Once you go there, then it's going to bring you to live videos. You can do this repeatedly for everything. Go all notifications. Make sure you go to that final page, and you need to make sure you update. That way when we go live, because until you get the swing of things, we're going to be moving things out so quickly. Desktops maybe they'll be a little bit different, but you want to make sure that maybe on your phone's different. Do it on your laptop so that you make sure it's done correctly. Because I know a lot of people use it. My husband uses his cell phone 24/7. He doesn't even have a computer. His cell phone is his life. So definitely, look at both options, see what works for you so you get those notifications. On Tuesdays, Linda and Lisa are going to be doing projects, which are super fun. I know Heather's going to be up here, and Heather and Laura are going to be doing a class as well. So just keep a lookout for those emails, and I know sometimes there's misinformation, like maybe my name being spelt wrong. My mother spelt my name. She swears she knew how to spell it, but I don't think anybody in the world spells it like I do. So even the website people were spelling it a little wrong. So sometimes our mistakes happen. The email today went out, and there was the wrong time, but it was probably us getting the information to them. Everything's moving so fastly with the holidays coming. We have so much we want to jam in. I know G and Sherry are out there, and I really want to get them to do a couple lives, to throw in a couple lives as well about the template organizer. We're talking about that, the one that hangs on the wall, them doing a live on that. So just make sure you're set to get those videos when they come up, even if you have to watch the replay. And sorry for going over today. I know people get sick of us after about an hour mark, but I did want to get Brian because I knew I probably wouldn't get him again today. Anytime soon. So I wanted to make sure that I got his story out because he's an amazing guy. And I know you guys love him as much as I do, even though the ones that have had the blessing to know him. Please do not forget to like, comment, and share. And if you can tag some friends in this video, it helps us grow our audience so that other people can be blessed like you guys are to get the information that you do. Because without Linda, Lisa, we just don't exist. My sister-in-law, Lynn, all the ones that work behind the scenes, we don't know much. Brian probably knows more about quilting than I ever thought about knowing. But just like in law enforcement,
don't know as much as they do.
But just like in law enforcement, he's taught me a lot, and patience is not one of the things he's been able to teach me. So if you have any questions, you can always email us at learn@martellinotions.com. Also, for those of you who own our long arms, please join our Facebook group. Janine James runs that Facebook group, and she is on there all the time. And if you have a question that needs to be answered, get on that group. My sister-in-law, Janine, my sister-in-law has had this machine from the beginning, and let me tell you, she's an expert on it. She's watching those groups, and she's helping out too. And that long arm, it's called Martelli Long Arm Group, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have one of our long arms, go join that group, reach out to them, because if it's always things happen at night, right, Brian? It's always 8, 9 o'clock at night. You have a question, go ask it. Somebody in that forum is going to be able to help you if you can't get a hold of one of us. And I watched a lot, and and I'll answer. People say, you're working at night. If I sit on my couch and Brian's next to me, and he does not have Facebook, so you cannot get a hold of him. I think he does it on purpose. I think it's the cop in him. He doesn't want anybody knowing anything about him. But generally, I'll be on there and I'll be like, Brian, da 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 da. He'll like, this is her problem. I'll be like, they're like, oh, that's it. Thank you. You know. So I do watch them. You can PM me or ask me questions because I'm usually got them sitting right next to me or within an earshot of me because he better answer my phone calls or I'll knock him out. So definitely reach out to me if you have anything. Learn at martellinotions.com if you have any questions. And I think I've covered everything. Is there any final questions before we go off?
No, just lots of love.
Well, thank you for the love. Keep it coming. And I really would like to have Brian come back because I didn't get to the quick spin and why that's important. There were so many things I didn't get to for long arms. I think there was just too much information. We should have done home deck and then done one on long arms. So I think we will come back maybe. And if you guys will start asking some questions in this group, I will go home tonight. I will look at it. So if there's questions that you didn't get answered or you're watching this on a replay and you want some questions answered, go ahead and try to put them in the comments and I will try to scroll through them and answer them for you tonight to the best of my ability. And we will have Brian back again very soon. So wanted to brag on him. He's a good guy. I love him, and we all thank him for his service, as we do everybody out there that's in the military or in law enforcement or even EMTs and firefighters alike.
And you
so.
too, Val.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Don't
me too.
discount
I do.
yourself.
I
mean,
do. I'm the one who's jumping out in a bad section of town going, Brian, you got to stop the car. We got to help them. Brian's like, I'm not wearing a uniform right now. I was like, Brian, you got to stop. He goes, Valerie, I'm going to stop. But so help me God, I'm not getting out of the car. You're gonna, because if something goes down, I gotta be there to help. I said, I can't be in the middle of it. So I'll get out and help the guy push the car. And Brian's always the back with the, the gun on his side and is, always thinking something bad's gonna happen. I'm like, whatever, nothing ever bad's gonna happen to me. I'm just gonna help everybody. So he keeps me grounded. So with that, I'm probably blessed because I'd probably be dead by now. So all right, we will see you next week. Thank you for joining us and hope you enjoy your week.